welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into one of the most curious creations in the world of digital finance, the stablecoin.
So let's just start with a question that honestly seems to go against the entire reason people get into crypto. Why would anyone want a digital coin that's specifically built not to go up in value? And that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It gets right to the core of what a stablecoin is, and maybe more importantly, what it isn't. If we can answer this, the whole thing starts to make a lot more sense.
Okay, Section 1. What is a stablecoin? Let's dive in and get a really clear definition on the table.
Well, the name kind of gives it away, right? Stability. Unlike Bitcoin with its wild, unpredictable price swings, a stablecoin is built to hold its value. It does this by pegging itself or tying itself to a real-world asset. And almost always, that asset is the US dollar.
And here's the difference in a nutshell. On one side, you have that classic crypto roller coaster, super high risk, but with the potential for a massive reward. And on the other side, you've got the stablecoin, just chugging along, trying to stay at that steady, predictable one-to-one value with the dollar. They're two completely different animals.
Which brings us to Section 2, the digital dollar dilemma. And this leads to a super logical and really important follow-up question.
Yeah, exactly. If you have one stablecoin, you have what's supposed to be $1. So why on earth would you bother with this crypto version instead of, just using a dollar?
So the answer is really all about how useful it is inside the crypto ecosystem. Think of it like a specialized tool for a specific job. First, there's speed. You can move funds anywhere in the world almost instantly without waiting for a bank transfer to clear. Second, efficiency. It lets you swap between different cryptocurrencies super quickly on an exchange. And third, access. It's basically your passport into the world of DeFi, decentralized finance, which is that whole parallel financial system built on the blockchain.
Okay, so that brings us to Section 3. We know it's a useful tool, but should you think of it as an investment?
Let's just cut right to the chase. If your goal is to buy low, sell high, and make a big profit, is a stablecoin the right vehicle for you?
And the answer, just based on its design, is a pretty straightforward no. Its entire purpose is to not change in value. So expecting high returns from a stablecoin is kind of like buying a hammer and hoping it grows into a house. It's not the right tool for that job. Okay, so it's not a lottery ticket. We get that. But are there any other financial perks to holding them? Besides that convenience factor we just talked about?
Actually, there can be. Some crypto platforms will pay you interest for holding or staking your stablecoins with them, and the returns can seem pretty attractive, often somewhere in the range of 2 to 8% a year. Which, hey, that's a nice little bonus for sure. But let's be real. It is not the kind of explosive, high-yield growth that gets people excited about the riskier side of crypto.
And that brings us to Section 4, the stability trap. Now, this is where the story gets really fascinating, because it turns out that a stablecoin's greatest strength, its stability, also hides its biggest weakness.
So here's the catch. When you peg your shiny new digital asset to the plain old US dollar, you don't just get its stability. You also inherit all of its problems. You're tying your futuristic tech to a very traditional and sometimes flawed system. Look, on any given day, the promise holds true. One stablecoin is worth $1. It feels safe, it feels reliable, and it feels predictable. But there's this invisible force at play that affects both of them equally: inflation. And over time, the purchasing power of that dollar goes down. So this means that while your stablecoin is still worth $1, that dollar simply doesn't buy as much stuff as it used to. Its stability and price comes at the cost of a slow decline in its real-world value. Which brings us to Section 5, the final verdict. So, after all that, where do we land? Who is this really for? When you boil it all down, a stablecoin is best seen as a practical tool for a specific job. It's fantastic for active crypto traders who need a stable place to park their money between trades. It's really useful for people who do a lot of international transfers and want to get around bank fees and delays. But if you're an investor who's looking for growth, or frankly, if you just don't really have a need to operate in the digital asset world, then holding regular dollars is probably the simpler and better choice.
And that leaves us with the really big question. As our financial world gets more and more digital, will stablecoins just stay as this niche tool for traders? Or will they evolve into a core part of how we all use money every day? Well, that is a story that is still being written. Thanks for joining this explainer.